before this pandemic hit, it just was normal to have a tremendous amount of debt. It was very normal to be living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, we as a country had created a situation where people really believed that access to credit means a good thing, you know, and it's not necessarily a good thing. If you don't have any savings, but you have a lot of credit, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're winning financially.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of New York 100. Thank you for clicking through to that video. I appreciate it. And I want to jump right into the topic here. So yesterday I was preparing for the interview and I was listening to a podcast, and at the Empire podcast with Frazier, he was saying, he said this quote. He was like, I gotta read it. Okay, bad times create good men. Wait, bad times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. Okay, so basically what happens is life is a cyclical event of good times and bad times, and we're just constantly going through, we're just one crisis away from next crisis, and we're always going through something, right? And if you're in a good time right now, you know, long and behold, you know, it'll be another crisis very soon, right? And as we're making this video, we're in a global crisis, so to speak. You know, we're going through the global pandemic, and whether it's a crisis in the globe, economic, in your business, personal, finances, relationships, we all have problems in our lives, right? So this video, I really want to focus in on how do we bounce back? How do we overcome, right? How do we rebuild our mind, body, spiritual wellness? How do we rebuild our finances once we've gone through some tumultuous times, right? So today I'm sitting with a specialist in this area. I'm very excited for this, Mayra Sanchez. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate it. And so Mayra is going to talk to you about how to regain your strength and how to, I guess, overcome and rebuild yourself in times of when you need that strength, right? So let's see. Perfect. So, all right. I think one of the best ways to get started, because I did a lot of research on you and your background, dragon lifestyle?
That's correct.
Whew. Dragon lifestyle, right? So like, how, your story of how that came about is really like, I guess, it will really set a preface for this interview. So how did dragon lifestyle come about? And then you can just tell me about your background from there, but you know, how did dragon lifestyle come about, Mayra?
Well, before I get into that, I'd like to say thank you for having me on your show.
Oh,
I really appreciate that. Dragon Lifestyle came about as a answer to a very strong struggle that I had in 2012 when Sandy came along into New York and basically demolished the first level of my home, leaving my daughters and I basically homeless for about 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And during that time, I really had to figure out how I was going to recover from that event, how I was going to deal with the enormous stress that event brought about in my life, and how I was going to push back on the idea of being a victim of Sandy. I didn't like that term. I didn't like that that was being labeled on an event that was natural. So I really pushed deep inside me. At the time I was working at the Traditional Chinese Medicine World Foundation, and I had to take some time off from work so that I could handle the personal experiences that were going on in my life. And I had to really focus on my health and the depletion that had come about, the financial depletion that had come about during that experience. So in that 6 weeks, when I spent a lot of time in deep meditation and trying to figure out what next, I decided that it was time for me to take on entrepreneurial efforts. I had already done that before in my past, and I always had that little bug inside me. And I wanted to help other people recover. In essence, that's what I thought was really needed. My community was not recovering the same way that I was. That they didn't have the tools that I had.
And back to that podcast, Empire Podcast, I'm like, I really like it. It's really good. And then one of the hosts there says, so you have to be built for winter. Meaning, like, you have to be built for the struggle, built pretty strongly. And I guess we'll go through your life and your journey, and you've kind of touched on, you've been through some things in the past and whatnot. So, but I have a question. So, people, well, this is a question that interviewers love to ask at the end of the interview. Okay. What is the key to success, right? I'm not going to ask that because I don't think.
Okay.
All right. But I don't believe there's a key to success, because that would mean that that means that you have a key, you open a door, and you reached it, and you've always had success, right? Success is a journey, it's a path, it's always an ongoing thing, right? Mm-hmm. So my thing is, like, why do we continuously fall into hard times? Why isn't life just a smooth sailing? You reach a certain point in life, and it's just everything good, coasting. Why do you think there's no such thing as a smooth sailing?
I actually disagree. It's
Really?
been my experience that I've encountered people that have smooth sailing, that
Really?
have coasted for many years. It's quite surprising to me.
Really?
And also intimidating in some ways, because early on in my life, I experienced that, and it made me question whether they were lying to me, or there really was a difference in how people lived. And what I reconcile, or what I've come to believe at this point in my life, is that people's paths have much more to do with their purpose than we like to think. So for myself, there were many stages where I questioned why I was going through such hard times when my colleagues and friends weren't. And I look back, because what is that? Hindsight is always 20/20,
yeah,
right? I look back and I see the miracles and the opportunities and the growth that I've experienced as a result of that. So I feel like I've been able to really step into my purpose, and I think that I've been, in essence, nurtured to have the role that I have at this stage of my life.
But do you think people are they're just better at masking their pain? Because we all have to go through some sort of pain. I mean,
are they better at masking? Yes, I was definitely part of one of those people. I honestly believe that if you ask people that knew me 30 years ago, they would say I had it all together. And I didn't. And I was definitely in pain 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But we were taught at that time to not present that face,
not display that
to the public. That face was for home, and when you were alone, and when you were in private. And I think that because you get conditioned that way, you just plow through. You soldier on, so to speak.
And so I was reading your blog, and one of your blog posts, it was crisis blurs vision, and the first statement is you said that crisis brings an opportunity for growth, right? And just like this is how Dragonlance actually came about. But why do you think crisis is a great foundation for growth?
That's a great question. I believe crisis is a great place for growth because it makes one act quickly. Sometimes when we hesitate on a decision, we talk ourselves out of the vision.
It provides a sense of urgency.
Right, and I think also a critical moment helps us clarify things instantly, and then we actually see who we really are rather than who we wish we were or who we presented ourselves to be.
So you see the truth of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
It's much harder to look yourself in the mirror and see a lie when everything is crumbling beneath you and around you, as opposed to looking in the mirror when everything is good.
Okay, so a lot of times, let me take this back to myself, man. 2017, 18, and I think this might be one of the first times I mentioned this on camera, maybe not. But 2018 was the worst, best/worst in hindsight best, but one of the, I guess, worst years that happened to me. A lot of tragic happened to me. So basically, someone had stole like a lot of money from me, right? And what that did was, it didn't just hurt me financially, hurt my confidence, hurt my self-confidence. That was primarily it. And of course, the people around you, they start saying things, and what people praised me for before is what now people disparage me for. For example, I'm very focused, but now I'm narrow-minded all of a sudden, you know? I'm very confident, but now I'm arrogant all of a sudden, right? I don't get that, just like that, right? And then what happens in that moment, as things started to unravel for me, I started to make more dumb decisions, right? Just to climb out of it. Now I'm making desperate decisions, right? Until eventually I fell flat on my butt and I had to start back over again. So 2019, that's when I started to recover, right? And I recovered stronger, actually. But in that moment of crisis, which was actually a span of like 7 months, the recovery was about like 6 months. But in the moment was about like, I guess like 3, 4, 7 months of like pure crisis. I didn't necessarily know I was. It took my brother to kind of snap me out of it, right? So my question is, when do you know that you're actually in a crisis? Like, when do you know? Because sometimes you don't really know. You just kind of, you're kind of going and going and going. When do you know that you actually hit rock bottom? And then once you know, what are the first 3 things that you should do?
Wow, that's a doozy of a question.
So first of all, how do you identify?
I love that question. I think that you identify yourself in a crisis when your life is no longer functioning for you. Because sometimes a trauma for one person is not a trauma for another. Based on what you tolerate, the pain tolerance that one originally has. So I think there's that part. And then I also believe that naming something is a very personal process.
What do you mean naming something?
When we identify or define a moment for ourselves, it's personal, right? People can define a situation that's going on in our life as not that important, but for us, it's everything, right? So I think that that's really the key that you said, and that's why the thing that someone might think is great today, in one light, in another light, all of a sudden seems like it's your fault that you're having this experience. And I think that that's what makes it very difficult for people to share their struggles, share the pains that are genuinely happening in their hearts, because the people around us may not always agree with our perspective. So I think the first thing is to identify that difference and know that that's normal and natural, and that that's a sign that we are all unique, and that our stories are unique, and that our purposes are unique, and that we should pay attention to those signals and those messages that are happening in our life, so that we can define what our next wisest move is.
Okay, what are those signals? What are those messages? What are you referring to here?
So the things that cause us pain, the things that give us a flurry of emotion that may or may not be agreed upon by the people around us. That is a great place to begin the process of introspection and trying to understand what the emotion that we're experiencing is trying to convey to us about us. about what matters to us. Because the idea of success or failure is still a personal identity. Like, we have to decide what that is based on what we believe success and failure is.
So I want to take me back to this moment. I want to get your insight on this. So, like, I knew, the moment I knew I wasn't, like, I don't know, whatever. I was laying in bed, and, like, no, it was like a few days. No, the exact moment I don't know, but around the time frame. So I'll tell you how I kind of got out of it. Oh, I know the exact moment. that's off camera. Yeah, it's the day after that day. Okay, so I woke up, and I had anxiety. Like, it felt like someone like strapped me, and like they just flashed like a show reel of every negative event that could potentially happen. And it's okay, now it's time to wake up and start your day, right? And that started to occur, right? And then, so every day I wake up with like at least a minute or so of like just anxiety attacks, right? And so what really snapped me out of it was, I said, Amadeus, let's just move. Let's just go, right? And so I created this like little flyer. I was like, I created this flyer for like this thing called Between the Lines, and I'm just going to interview people. And I walked up to like nearby businesses and said, hey, can I interview you? And I worked at the gym nearby, and I went to a personal trainer and said, hey, can I interview you? And so I started essentially what was London 100, right? At that time. And I just always felt as if, and if someone watches those videos and study it, they'll see that all the questions that I'm asking is related to the moment. Like, all those questions, I was coming from like a underdog place, underdog mentality. So I was asking questions in relation to like motivation. If you see it, you will understand it now. If you watch this interview and go back and watch those episodes. So I was literally asking people questions that I needed the answers to. And I said, listen, if I share this on camera, then people wanna, they might resonate with it. And so for me, just to go back to the question, like, for me, in order to overcome that crisis, I just had to go. I said, let me just move. Let me stop thinking. Let me just get out of bed as fast as I can and move, right? And eventually I kind of just I busied my way out of it until it no longer a thought. So my question for you is, what would you recommend for someone who's going through a crisis? How do they jolt and get themselves out of it?
Well, my recommendation is similar to what you chose to do, but from a different angle.
Okay.
So for me, I really related to what you said about the anxiety, because I experienced that. I literally experienced panic attack after panic attack after panic attack those first few days, probably a week and a half or so after Sandy. And I was really surprised by that, because I had never experienced that in myself before. I had gone through difficult times, but I had never experienced these uncontrollable physical manifestations of feeling that left me undone. It was as if when I was experiencing that, I thought I was dying every moment. I really thought, this is it. I'm going to die. I just am going to die through this experience. And then I would live. And it was very stressful. But what I had to focus myself on was not doing. I actually chose to stop and go so deep inside myself that I could figure out what my best and wisest choice was, because it was a depleting time. With all the little things that had to be done, the cleaning, I mean, there was so much cleaning after the ocean was inside my house. And that experience was like, would begin in the morning and it would continue on until nighttime. So I was physically doing so many things. But what I noticed was that when I was physically doing, it was fine. But if my mind was going at a different rate than my physical body, I was exhausted, like depleted. Meaning my thoughts while I was doing whatever I was doing were so, like they were so gone. It was as if my mind separated from my physical body. So our minds can think thoughts so fast that we almost could be mindless, like actually have no clue what is going on in our minds, right? But we can't actually do that in our physical bodies. So what I did during that time by slowing, like intentionally meditating, was integrating again the parts of me that had become fragmented after the crisis. Meaning my mind was thinking one thing, my body was doing one thing, my spirit was another. And we are a mind, body, spirit together. And our best actions come when all aspects of us are integrated and informing the greater whole.
That really leads really beautifully into what I want to talk about, is how do we bring in our mind, body, and soul into, I guess, the recreation or the rebuilding of self, right?
It's a practice, Amadeus. That's really the key component. I had to learn how to do it. It doesn't come naturally. Or maybe when we're children it is natural, but then somehow we lose that. And so I went into Chinese medicine and martial arts in order to learn how to take care of myself properly, how to actually bring together all aspects of myself and get to know who I was in my totality rather than parts of me that were approved of depending on the situation.
Yeah, so we spoke about what crisis is and how it impacts the human life, how it actually elevates us. But so I want to know, how did you actually take that transition? Like, you said you went inward. What are some of the tools and resources that you use for yourself, and how did you go inward? What was that process like for you?
Well, in order to answer that question, we have to go further back, right? That was in 2012. That's what I did during that crisis. But many years before, in 2006, I had just recently gotten divorced, and I was a single mom of 2 young kids, and I didn't have the tools and the coping mechanisms to deal with the busyness of being a single mom and all the pressures that were associated with having to figure out how to financially support them and myself, and how to continue supporting my family and be a caregiver the way that I had already been doing. I became very, very ill, and I was on disability probably a year in bed because I had just lost all my health. I was totally depleted, burnt out, as they would say. So when I started to recover from there, I started realizing that I had to find a new way of managing my life, because I had a lot of chronic symptoms that made my life very unhappy and very difficult. And in your 20s, you should have all the energy in the world, not be totally depleted and unable to function. So that led me to find a martial arts class called The Dragon's Way at that time. And I had never heard of that. And I decided, all right, I'll give it a try. And that was the turning point for me. That was a real turning point. That program really transformed my entire life because it gave me the practical tools, the things that I could do, excuse me, every day to support my own body in healing itself.
I would like to know, at least, what was one of the, I guess, one things that you can remember, or one of the more significant things, or?
One major thing was diet.
Diet, okay.
So when we talk about going internally, right, because that's part of the thing that you asked, right? How do I go inside? Well, going inside me was a foreign thing. I if someone had said that to me, I'd say, what do you mean? Because it never occurred to me to ask myself, what do I need? What do I want? I was eating on the clock at that time. I was saying, okay, it's lunchtime, and I had a certain hour to eat. I was working in corporate America at the time, so everything I did was around a external clock, not an internal clock. So I didn't eat when I was hungry. I ate when it was time to eat. And that's a very big, subtle difference, because eating is so fundamental to life, and it supports life. And so if you don't even have a good relationship with food, then generally the consequence of that is that you're sometimes eating with no understanding of your actual appetite, eating with no understanding of nutrition, eating with no understanding of what your actual unique body needs. And the Dragon's Way Qigong program had an eating for healing element. So it gave me the hints about how I could identify what my body specifically needed in terms of fuel and nutrition. And so then I began that process. I started to relearn how to eat for my own health and well-being.
I can assume that this is kind of the same for sleeping as well. Okay, understanding your actual rhythm, your actual sleep pattern and whatnot.
Exactly. What is the cycle of my own body's function? Where is my high cycle, so I could organize what activity at what time?
Do you have a particular sleep cycle or do you have a particular sleep regimen?
Well, I discovered for myself that I'm a morning person, so my energy is highest at the morning. So in the morning I can exercise. In the morning I can do I can write. I can do writing. I can do strong things that require mental energy. As the day wears on, my energy naturally starts to tick down. Right? And we see this a lot in our nature and in our environment, because at 3 o'clock everybody's going for coffee and things like that to try to rev up again. But if we learn through the process what our natural cycles are, then we can make decisions that can support that process of maintaining our cycles as high up as possible. So I don't plan anything that requires a lot of energy past 7 p.m.
I have a quite unique one. I'd love your take on it, or just to share. So I wake up around 7, and I work like you. In the morning I'm really creative, and then once it's 7 to 1, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 1, it's 6 hours. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. Okay, someone's gonna that's 6 hours ever. So from 7 to 1, that's 6 hours of really just straight work, right? And I can go that amount. But then from 1 to 2 I eat, and 2 to 5 actually is sleep. I sleep midday. So this is around the time I actually sleep. So I actually sleep midday for 3 hours. And then what it does, it separates my day. But when I wake up around 5, I'm good to go again. So I'm good to go for another 6 hours. And so I don't know, some people say you need 8 straight hours of sleep. I get 8 hours, but I get it differently. I get a 3-hour nap in the middle of the day and 5 hours at the end of the night. And so that's kind of my sleep pattern. I know if that's, I know that's not natural, but that's what I do. Is that okay?
Well, again, if that's working for you,
it really doesn't work for me.
That it really doesn't?
No, it does.
It really does. It really does. And that's the key, right? Because that's the whole idea, is that we know internally what works optimally for us, right? And the thing is that sometimes we question whether what works for us is optimal if it's not what everybody else is doing. So for me, I was taking naps, and I love naps, in the afternoon when I was under high stress situations. So I do notice that part of my cycle is that I sleep 7 to 9 hours a night, generally speaking, but in crisis moments, I found that I also slept another 1 or 2 hours in the middle of the day. And sometimes I really hated myself for that. I thought that was a problem.
But was it?
Or that it was a signal that I was getting sick, or that there was something wrong with me. No, it's just that under high stress situations, the body needs more time to repair.
Okay, that makes sense. And so I also want to continue on. So you took, I don't want to enunciate this incorrectly. What was the name of the course?
It was the Dragon's Way program.
Okay.
Its foundation is Qigong.
Okay.
So it's now actually called the Dragon's Way Qigong program.
And then, so you also have these, this is why this is sitting here in the center of the room, right?
That's right.
And so you also have a book from me. So actually, I'm just going to hand this over to you. Can you actually explain, what you have in this collection?
Because we were talking about the Dragon's Way program, I brought the components of the Dragon's Way program, which are here, right? This program is amazing because I did it in a class, but under the circumstances, you can do it at home. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because it has a book, so you can read about all the science behind why this holistic program is so beneficial and works so well. And then you can also get a DVD or have a downloadable yeah, thank you. Have it onto your computer, and then you can do the program at home. Okay. And it's beautiful. Before this program, I used to do boxing to keep my weight down. And I loved boxing, but the weight training was killing me, and I needed way too many naps. And when I learned how to do this, this took over all my interests in that activity. So now this is the only exercise I do.
Oh, so these are different exercises. Like what is it? Okay, based on Qigong. So okay, so I guess
Qigong is movement.
Okay.
Right? It's an energy movement, an energy exercise, so to speak. The purpose of it, though, is to stimulate the flow of qi in your body, right? And from the traditional Chinese medicine framework, qi is what energizes all of life. When you have no qi, you're gone, right? So the idea is that our bodies need qi to continue. There's a qi that we're already born with, and then there's the qi that comes from the food we eat, the connections that we make, the places that we go, the environment, nature has a lot of qi, and so we can absorb all of that.
Okay. Well, this is and then can people find that resource on your website as well?
Yes. Okay. Well, they can find it on their own website. They can find it on my website at dragonlifestyle.com. And if they have any questions, they can always connect with me, and I'm happy to put them through that. And
again, you don't get promoted. I mean, you don't.
I don't get an endorsement.
You're an endorsement. It's just really passion. This really helped you out. So you really
exactly. Well, this is the thing that made the largest difference in my life at the time. Should I say my age?
No, that's up to you.
I'm at 51 today and now, and my whole life is 100% better than it was in my 20s. My health is totally recovered. I have a lot of energy, thank God, and I attribute that to this program. So it made such a profound difference in my life that I changed careers at that stage of life. I was in corporate America, and then I said, no, I want to devote myself to really promoting this because it was so transformative for me.
Okay. All right. And what about Dave Ramsey here? You have the Dave Ramsey.
That's right. Dave Ramsey is the second program that I found, and that was after Sandy. So that event depleted me financially, and I was still doing pretty well at that stage of life, but I was looking to figure out, okay, some of my nest egg and retirement money that I had squirreled away was depleted, and that's kind of what happens. You put emergency funds away for a rainy day, and then it really poured that day, and all those funds go away, so you then have to rebuild. And that's how I found this program, and then I loved it because it was, I took Financial Peace University, which is one of his major foundational programs, and when I went through it, I was amazed at all the principles because that's how I had broken my shopping therapy and debt situation many years back. So I knew that the program worked, and there were some things I needed to tweak in my own personal life to reposition myself. But these two programs are just phenomenal, and I do everything I can to put them out there because they're affordable, they work, They helped me, and everything I do is based on these two organizations.
So we spoke about what crisis is. We spoke about what you've been through, and we also spoke about the resources that you use. Now I really want to help someone, let's just say, who's in that mode right now. How do we get them out of it, right? So what I'd like to know is, from someone who's in the moment right now, how can they actually get out of it? So the first thing you said is with going inward, right? And what are the questions that someone can ask themselves to get them, and what are some of the actions that they can take?
Okay, the first action is to make a decision. So when you say that someone is in their crisis moment, they have to decide whether they're going to move out of the situation or not. They have to actually decide if they're going to be in recovery or stuck, treading water, right? And I think that that's really a key component, because most people try to avoid making a decision. And that's honestly the only way that you're going to move forward.
Make a decision.
Step 1 is make a decision. Step 2, be willing to step out of your comfort zone. So ask yourself, what are you willing to do differently to at least gather more information so that you can make a plan to evolve. So the only key that really matters is the decision and actually accepting that the life we knew is gone, and it's time to make a change, time to move forward.
Accept that the life we knew was gone. Oof, that is difficult.
It's terribly difficult. It's not impossible, though. And the reality is that if we do not move into acceptance, we just tend to stay stuck for a long time. Right? Right now, during this time, we're grieving the loss of the life we knew. And we're upset about it. And it's natural to be upset about it. And yet there's a lot of opportunity around us. But our sights have to either be on an obstacle or an opportunity. The same mind that creates a problem cannot create a solution. So we have to choose to think differently. We have to choose to be in that recovery phase. And we have to accept that that takes time, right? The crisis is like a moment, although this crisis is a little longer, right? But we're still adapting to living in crisis. We're not actually in the crisis every day. Would you agree?
Got it.
Like there's a day or a moment that you feel you find yourself in a crisis. But it's always a shorter amount of time than the time you're going to spend in recovery. So we have to actually understand that the recovery time takes longer, and be willing to walk that unknown path.
And I also want to talk about, how do we rebuild financially, right? Because when you get hit hard, and from a financial standpoint, hey, one of Dave Ramsey's talking points is, okay, you have 6 months. What was it? It's have
an emergency fund?
Emergency funds, 3 to 6 months expenses. But what happens when you start using that? Right? What happens when emergency time comes? It's a rainy day. Now it's time to use it.
Yeah.
And how do we rebuild that?
How do you rebuild that? Well, you can't rebuild it while you're still in the crisis.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult. It's almost impossible, right? What I have found is the real key is to maintain a very conservational approach to the financial decisions one's making daily. So the reason why I love these two programs is because their framework is really just like flexible. It's a flexible framework. It's not a rule book.
Okay.
It's a flexible framework. And the reason why I support people who are trying to use these programs is because I had to figure out how to work them in my life, right? Because it's not a rule book. Our desires to quickly get through something makes us want the easy answer. But we all are unique. We have unique situations going on. We have unique appetites going on. So we have to readjust ourselves to a model that's going to work for us while we're continuing to go through through the recovery, right? Recovery doesn't mean a punishment. You can actually enjoy your life and still be in recovery. You just have to prioritize differently. And that's really the key component, is identifying what is on your financial budget plan that is not necessary right now.
So identify your necessities and more of a, you said, a conservational approach.
Right. Okay. To maintain a conservational approach, because we need to conserve our energy, we need to conserve our time, we need to conserve our money. Basically, we need to conserve all our resources right now. Right? And sometimes people's appetite and desire to be in the know positions them to deplete themselves because they emotionally can't handle what they're reading or watching. So sometimes we have to actually choose ourselves and say, I don't need to know right now. I can take a moment, give myself a little time out, and allow myself to get strong enough to be able to go back in and receive more information.
Mayra, I really don't even feel like we scratched the surface. I mean, like I had no idea, like, an hour and a half to spend by. I mean, I would say I had to check the cameras in between takes, but like, that was so fast. And there's so much more that we can discuss. I understand it, but that's on you to, book, reach out to Mayra and see how, she can help you out. I really do feel like we did not even touch the surface, but it's up for you to continue on the conversation. I'll leave all the links in the description below. But this is final. I want to wrap this interview up because time constraints. Because I do want to talk about the financial point. I wanted to dive deeper about that. Because you said conservational. I remember just going back to like my lowest moment, and it took me like several months to kind of recover. I was pretty much only doing the necessities, and even to this day, that's still what I do. I'm not really one that kind of spends my money frivolously, right? So, but yeah, that was really important for me in terms of recovering financially, is, like you said, necessity. So, debt. I had to talk about that because I have to. Let's see it's okay. Let's talk about it before we go.
Okay.
First of all, debt. Good or bad?
Terrible.
Terrible.
Debt is like a gun.
Okay.
It's good in some instances, but you have to have training to use it. If you don't have training and it's in the wrong hands, bad things can happen.
I really think that, like you said, it's like a gun. It can protect, it can kill. Because I actually find that to be really damn good. So I have a really good credit score, and but I can easily see how people can use this. And can you actually just explain what this is? And I guess.
Well, this is something that I created out of my own history. Right? When I teach FPU classes, I like to show this because I want people to understand that I know what it is to be buried in debt. Because I had a very bad habit, a very challenging habit to deal with my feelings and emotions by shopping. And it created an uncomfortable situation because I had a lot of debt. And, And I literally had to recognize that all this weight I was carrying that was leading to so much stress in my life was part of why I got depleted in the first place. I just didn't have good coping skills to deal with the stressors of life, and I thought, oh, well, I deserve it. And I ended up shopping and doing things that, when I look back on it, They were just liabilities. And really, that's a key thing. I never knew that there was a difference between a liability and an asset at that stage of my life. So these things are generally geared towards liability, right? Cars, expensive things. Sometimes we put ourselves under situations because we want to feed our pleasure for the moment. And all we do is actually create a struggling situation for the long run. We should have pleasures. We should totally have pleasures. But we should have pleasures we can pay for, not pleasures that we're trying to make sure that doesn't get repoed later on and all that. Right now, this is something that I think is very important because I've seen an uptick in clients and people coming to make some changes in their financial lives. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that before this pandemic hit, it just was normal to have a tremendous amount of debt. It was very normal to be living paycheck to paycheck. We as a country had created a situation where people really believed that access to credit means a good thing, and it's not necessarily a good thing. If you don't have any savings, but you have a lot of credit, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're winning financially.
I'll absorb that. Because I understand what you mean. So even, for example, I do have access to credit, not too much, but I just started my credit score. I just opened up a credit card like last year. It's the first time I opened up a credit card. But I don't spend my credit card money. I spend my savings. I spend my actual cash. I use my credit card, but I use a cash that I physically have. I spend the amount that, basically, I have a credit card. I have credit cards, but I spend the amount that I actually have in cash, so I can pay it back monthly. But I don't know. Generally, do you think we should avoid credit or just become smarter? Everyone says they're gonna be smart about it, and they never do. Do you just say just avoid it in general, or like become smart about it? What would be your take on that?
Depends on where you are.
Okay.
I had to lock myself. I had to lock away the credit cards and go out without credit cards for months. Okay. Because I was so accustomed, so habituated to just use my credit card that I lost control. And that's really the key component. You have to understand where you are in terms of self-control and self-regulation. If you're not at a place where you can trust yourself to make the wisest choice for you and your household, then you really shouldn't have a credit card. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have one. You just have to be really responsible and know yourself and make a decision based on that reality. Not what you'd like it to be, not what you'd like other people to think you are, but what you actually know about yourself. And that's what makes a difference.
Oh my goodness, we don't have no time. Okay. So literally, I wish we had more time. But I'll leave these questions for you to discuss with Mayra. So, final question like that I like to ask all of my guests, right, before I go.
Okay.
Okay. Urgency or patience?
Patience.
Okay. Working hard or working smart?
Working smart.
Okay. All right. So this is a hefty one, right?
Okay.
There's two hefty ones. Okay. Let's talk to Mayra when she was back in I guess high school.
Okay.
Okay, right? High school. I guess when you said you moved to Los Angeles and you came back to New York. Let's just say you came back to New York, right? There's that time.
Okay.
Now, you are. Did you share a room or had a room by yourself?
I had a room by myself.
Yeah. So you're in your room right now, back in high school, and you see this distant figure in your room, and it's like, and you get a look at it, and it's actually you right now today.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're looking at yourself right now today. You're seeing Mayra. And your Mayra today says, listen, I have 30 seconds to be with you. What do you say to that Mayra in 30 seconds?
I would hug her, and I would say it's going to be okay. Because at that stage of my life, I had gone through my brother's passing, and it was very, very traumatizing, and I really needed someone to say that to me, because if he were alive at that time, that's what he would have said.
And so now you're back here. Now you're back here with me, right? But I still want you to imagine somebody, right? And I want you to think about somebody like right now. Think about somebody. Don't say their name.
Okay.
But the first person that comes to mind, doesn't have to be just somebody that's significant to you, that you know.
Okay.
Right? Besides yourself, obviously besides me, you have someone in mind?
Yeah.
You have them?
Yeah.
Okay. What's something that you never said to them that you want to say?
You're my best friend.
Thank you so much, Mayra. Would you mind explaining to, I guess, this camera right here, where people can find you? This camera, yeah, your website, your socials, whatnot.
Well, you can find me at dragonlifestyle.com. You can also find me on Instagram at La Mama Dragon. And you can also find me on Facebook under Mayra Sanchez. And I'd love to talk to you.
So everyone, literally, I really do feel as if time flew here. I don't know where the time went. And we went into, basically, listen, life is, well, I believe it's not smooth sailing. I think we're going to have ups and downs, and continuously ups and downs. But some of those downs go a little bit deeper sometimes. And we need help to be, pulled out of that. And sometimes we think we can do it ourselves, but it's good to have someone else coach us and help us bring us back to the light. And even if everything is going, generally good, sometimes it's good to have principles instilled in you so that you can continue to progress even further. Like Mayra mentioned, some of the exercises, some of the books, some of the financial awareness, things that can keep us moving forward. So if you have any problems in that area, or you want to just, I guess, improve yourself, then please do reach out to Mayra. I mean, I do not prep anyone in these interviews, and she's really displayed her wealth of knowledge here. So thank you so much for watching this interview. I truly appreciate it if you stay for this long. Make sure you get in contact, and remember, to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I have a lot of interviews, very motivational and things like that. So if you haven't already, subscribe, and remember, be great. Cheers.
Thank you, Amadeus.
That was amazing.
It was good to be here. Thank you so much. You were real easy. You made it so easy for me. Woo! Thank you.